The constant hum of machinery filled Marcus Reed's workshop on Epsilon 9 space station. Grease covered his hands as he worked on yet another broken engine, just like any other day. The difference was that today would change his life forever. A shadow fell across his workbench. Looking up, Marcus saw a tall, gray-skinned alien merchant standing in the doorway. The merchant's 4 eyes blinked rapidly, and his long fingers kept tapping against his leg. Something about him seemed off, but work had been slow lately, and Marcus couldn't afford to be picky. "Need repairs?" Marcus asked, wiping his hands on a cloth. The merchant nodded quickly and led him to a ship docked in the lower bay. The vessel was a mess. Scoring marks along the hull, damaged engines, and signs of weapons fire that the merchant claimed came from asteroid damage. Marcus knew better, but credits were credits. "Can fix. Take 3 days," Marcus said, keeping his language simple for the alien's translator. "Payment up front." The merchant's upper eyes narrowed while the lower ones darted around nervously. "Half now, half when complete," the merchant countered. Marcus didn't like it, but he agreed. The first half payment cleared, and he got to work. For 3 days, Marcus worked almost nonstop. The damage was worse than he'd initially thought, requiring him to replace entire systems and rebuild the engine's core. When he finally finished, his back ached and his eyes burned from lack of sleep, but the ship purred like new. The merchant returned for inspection, all 4 eyes widening at the quality of work. But when Marcus pulled up the payment screen, the merchant's skin changed color, a sign of distress in his species. "Problem with credits," the merchant said, his translator crackling. "Offer alternative payment." He gestured to someone outside the bay. A figure stepped into view, and Marcus's breath caught. It was clearly female, humanoid but not human, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer under the station's harsh lights. Her long silver hair was tied back simply, and she wore plain gray coveralls. But there was something about the way she carried herself, a grace that seemed out of place. "This is Luna," the merchant said. "Good worker, skilled, worth more than credits owed." He held out a control pad. A slave controller, Marcus realized with growing horror. Marcus had heard about alien slavery, but had never encountered it directly. Out here on the frontier of human space, laws were more suggestion than rule. His gut twisted. "Not interested in slaves," he said firmly. The merchant's skin rippled again. "Then no payment. No other options." His hand moved toward a weapon poorly concealed under his coat. Marcus looked at Luna. Her face remained carefully blank, but her eyes, a striking violet color, met his for just a moment. In that brief look, he saw intelligence, fear, and something else he couldn't quite name. "Fine," Marcus said, the word tasting bitter in his mouth. "Give me the control pad." The merchant practically shoved it into his hands, then hurried aboard his ship. Within minutes, the vessel had undocked and vanished into space, leaving Marcus alone with Luna. Marcus looked at the control pad in his hands with disgust. Without hesitation, he dropped it on the ground and crushed it under his boot. The sound made Luna flinch. "I don't own slaves," he said clearly, meeting her eyes. "You're free to go wherever you want." Luna's perfect posture faltered for just a moment, confusion crossing her features. Her voice was soft, with an accent he'd never heard before. "I have nowhere to go." Marcus ran a hand through his short brown hair, thinking. "You can stay with me until you figure things out," he offered. "I have a spare room. No strings attached." Luna studied him carefully, her head tilting slightly. "Why would you help me?" "Because it's right," Marcus said simply. "And because no person should be property." Something shifted in Luna's expression, the tiniest crack in her careful mask. She nodded once, a gesture that somehow seemed both grateful and regal. As Marcus led her to his quarters, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was much more to Luna than met the eye. He had no idea just how right he was, or how much his act of kindness would change not only his life, but the fate of entire civilizations. The first few days of living with Luna proved both fascinating and strange for Marcus. He had given her the spare room in his modest station quarters, and she had accepted it with an odd mix of gratitude and what almost seemed like confusion at its simplicity. The morning after her arrival, Marcus found Luna staring at the food synthesizer as if it were a puzzle to be solved. Her long silver hair was perfectly braided, despite having no obvious tools to do so, and she stood with perfect posture that made Marcus feel slouchy in comparison. "Here, let me show you how it works," Marcus said, reaching for the controls. Luna stepped back quickly, maintaining a careful distance. He pretended not to notice her wariness and demonstrated the basic commands. "It's not great food, but it's edible. You can pick whatever you want." Luna's violet eyes studied the machine intently. "Thank you," she said in that musical accent of hers, but she didn't move to use it until Marcus had left the room. Later that day, Marcus brought Luna to his workshop. "You can help if you want, or just rest. Whatever you prefer." He expected her to choose rest, given her apparent refinement. Instead, she surprised him by picking up a tool and examining it with obvious familiarity. "This plasma cutter is misaligned," she said softly, making a minor adjustment that Marcus hadn't even noticed was needed. The tool hummed more smoothly afterward. "You know mechanics?" he asked, trying to hide his surprise. Luna's shoulders tensed slightly. "I learned some things here and there." Her words were careful, measured, as if each one was chosen specifically to reveal as little as possible. As they worked together, Marcus noticed more oddities. Luna's hands were soft, without calluses, yet she handled complex tools with expertise. When she thought he wasn't looking, she would sometimes touch strange markings on her skin that seemed to shimmer under her coveralls. Whenever anyone entered the workshop, she would quickly move to the background, becoming almost invisible. The station's other residents had started to notice her too. Marcus caught their whispers and stares. Some were just curious about the mysterious blue-skinned alien, but others seemed suspicious. Rumors spread quickly on a space station. One evening, as they were cleaning up the workshop, a customer's child knocked over a box of expensive parts. Before Marcus could react, Luna had moved with impossible grace, catching the box and its contents in midair. The movement was too quick, too precise for someone who claimed to be a simple worker. "Where did you learn to move like that?" Marcus asked after the customers had left. Luna froze for a moment, then continued organizing tools with mechanical precision. "One picks up various skills when traveling," she said vaguely. That night, Marcus woke to strange sounds from Luna's room. Soft words in an unknown language, musical and complex. He approached her door quietly, concerned. Through the small gap, he saw Luna practicing what looked like a formal dance, her movements precise and elegant. But what caught his attention were the markings on her exposed arms. They seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, forming intricate patterns that reminded him of star charts. Luna must have sensed his presence. She stopped instantly, the markings fading as she pulled on her coveralls. "Is something wrong?" she asked through the door, her voice perfectly composed. "No," Marcus replied, feeling guilty for spying. "Just checking if you needed anything." He returned to his room, mind racing. Everything about Luna was a contradiction. She had the knowledge of an engineer, the movements of a dancer, the speech of an educated person, and strange technology literally written on her skin. Yet she had been sold as a slave by a shifty merchant who couldn't get away fast enough. Marcus lay awake for hours, thinking. He had saved Luna from slavery, but he was increasingly certain that he had stumbled into something much bigger than a simple case of indentured servitude. The question was, would helping her bring trouble to his door? And more importantly, did he care if it did? In the quiet hours of the station's night cycle, he decided it didn't matter. Whatever Luna's story was, whatever she was hiding from, he would help her. Sometimes, he thought, You had to do the right thing and deal with the consequences later. A month had passed since Luna's arrival, and she had become an invaluable part of Marcus's workshop. Her knowledge of alien technology often left him speechless. Today, she was explaining the inner workings of a broken quantum drive to a customer in perfect technical standard, a language most humans spent years studying. The customer, a tentacled merchant from the outer rim, bobbed his head appreciatively at her expertise. After he left, Marcus couldn't hold back his curiosity anymore. "Where did you really learn all this?" he asked, watching her clean her tools with practiced precision. Luna's hands paused for just a moment. "My people believe in thorough education," she said carefully. Her violet eyes met his, then quickly looked away. "We study many things." "Your people," Marcus repeated. "You've never told me what species you are." He tried to keep his tone casual as he handed her a wrench. A small smile crossed her face. "No, I haven't." She took the wrench, her fingers brushing his. Marcus noticed that the strange markings on her skin seemed to pulse faintly at the contact. Their conversation was interrupted by the station's warning system. "Attention all residents. Unidentified vessels approaching. Security protocols engaged." The mechanical voice echoed through the workshop. Luna's face went pale, her blue skin taking on an almost white shade. She moved to the workshop's viewport, scanning the stars with obvious concern. 3 sleek ships had appeared at the edge of the station's scanning range. Their design was unlike anything Marcus had seen before. Smooth, organic lines that seemed to flow like liquid metal. "We should return to the quarters," Luna said, her voice tight with barely controlled fear. "Now." Marcus wanted to ask why, but Luna's expression stopped him. They hurried through the station's corridors, Luna keeping her head down and staying close to the walls. As they rounded the final corner to their living space, they nearly collided with 2 station security officers. "Identification check," one officer said, reaching for his scanner. Before he could activate it, Luna spoke in a language Marcus had never heard before. The words seemed to ripple through the air, and both officers' eyes glazed over slightly. They stepped aside, continuing their patrol as if they hadn't seen anything. Marcus waited until they were safely inside their quarters before turning to Luna. "What did you just do?" "A simple confusion technique," she said, pacing the room. "It will not harm them." She stopped at the viewport, watching the mysterious ships with growing anxiety. Marcus sighed. "I haven't been entirely honest with you." "I noticed," he said dryly, but without anger. "Those ships are looking for you, aren't they?" Luna nodded slowly. "Yes, but not for the reasons you might think." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing the intricate markings that covered her arm. In the privacy of their quarters, she didn't try to hide how they glowed with a soft, pulsing light. "These are not tattoos or decorations. They are a birthright, a sign of—" She hesitated. "A sign of position." Marcus stepped closer, fascinated by the dancing lights under her skin. The patterns seemed to tell a story, one of stars and planets and ancient power. "What kind of position?" Before Luna could answer, the station shuddered. The unknown ships had moved closer, their presence triggering the station's defensive systems. Luna's markings flared brightly in response to the commotion, forming new patterns that spread up her neck and across her face. "I trust you, Marcus," she said suddenly, her voice carrying a new weight and authority he had never heard before. "You saved me without knowing who I was. You treated me with kindness when you thought I was nothing but a slave." She took a deep breath. "I need to show you something, but once I do, everything will change. Are you prepared for that?" Marcus looked at this mysterious woman who had turned his simple life upside down. In just a month, she had become more than just someone he helped. She had become a friend, a partner, and maybe something more. Whatever secret she was about to reveal, whatever danger those ships represented, he knew his answer. "Show me," he said simply. The lights in the station flickered and died, plunging everything into darkness. Emergency power kicked in moments later, casting a red glow through the quarters. But it wasn't the emergency lights that illuminated Luna's face, it was her own skin. The markings Marcus had glimpsed before now blazed like starfire across her entire body, shining through her clothes. Intricate patterns swirled and shifted, forming shapes that looked like royal crests and ancient symbols. Her silver hair floated as if caught in an invisible breeze, and her violet eyes glowed with inner light. "I am Luna, first princess of the stellar empire of Alderus," she said, her voice carrying an authority that filled the room. "Keeper of the 9 stargates, guardian of the ancient ways, and rightful heir to the crystal throne." Each title made the markings on her skin pulse brighter. Marcus stood speechless. He had guessed Luna was hiding something significant, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. A princess, an actual alien princess. "The merchant who sold me to you," Luna continued, her voice hardening, "was part of a revolutionary group called the Starbreakers. They kidnapped me during a diplomatic mission, planning to use me as leverage against my father, the Emperor." Her hands clenched into fists. "But their plans went wrong when another faction tried to claim me for themselves. The merchant panicked and needed to hide me quickly." The station shook again as another wave of energy from the approaching ships hit the shields. Luna's markings flared in response, and Marcus noticed they seemed to be forming defensive patterns now. "Those ships," Marcus said, understanding dawning. "They're not your people coming to rescue you, are they?" Luna shook her head. "No, the Starbreakers realized their mistake in losing me. They've come to take me back." She moved to the viewport, watching the ships with calculated concern. "But they're not the only ones hunting me. There are others who would use me to destroy everything my family has built." Marcus joined her at the viewport, his mind racing. "Why tell me this now? Why trust me with this?" Luna turned to him, her expression softening. "Because you showed me something I had never seen before. Among my people, everyone treats me as their princess first. Protocol, ceremony, endless political games." Her hand reached out, almost touching his chest, but stopping just short. "But you treated me as a person. You showed me kindness, expecting nothing in return. You taught me about simple things. Making food, fixing engines, laughing at bad station jokes." The ship's proximity alert blared through the quarters. The hunting vessels were preparing to dock. Luna's markings shifted again, forming what looked like battle patterns. "I have to leave," she said urgently. "If I stay, they'll tear this station apart looking for me. I won't put these people in danger." She started gathering her few belongings. Marcus caught her arm gently. Where their skin touched, her markings swirled with new patterns he hadn't seen before. "You mean we have to leave?" Luna stared at him. "Marcus, no. This isn't your fight. These people, they're dangerous. They have technologies and powers you can't imagine." "Maybe," Marcus agreed. "But I'm pretty good with a wrench, and I know every smuggler's route in this sector. Plus," he gave her a small smile, "someone needs to keep your Royal Highness from getting lost in the common parts of space stations." A sound escaped Luna's lips. Half laugh, half sob. Her markings rippled with emotions she couldn't quite hide. "You would risk everything. For me." "For a friend," Marcus corrected her. "The whole princess thing is just a bonus." He moved to his storage unit, pulling out a worn bag. "I know some people who owe me favors. We can get a ship, supplies." He stopped when he felt Luna's hand on his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. The words carried the weight of royal decree, but the emotion behind them was purely Luna. The station's docking alert sounded. They had minutes at most. "Time to run?" Marcus asked. Luna nodded, her markings shifting into determined patterns. "Time to run." The maintenance tunnels of Epsilon 9 were a maze of pipes and conduits, but Marcus knew them like the back of his hand. He led Luna through the darkness, their footsteps echoing against metal floors. Behind them, they could hear the heavy boots of search parties and the electronic whine of scanning devices. "This way," Marcus whispered, pulling Luna into a narrow passage. Her markings had dimmed to a faint glow, just enough to see by. They reached a small hangar bay used for repair work, and more importantly, home to Marcus's secret project. "Meet the Starkiller," he said, gesturing to a small ship. It wasn't pretty. Patches of different colored hull plating made it look like a metal quilt, but it was fast. "Been fixing her up in my spare time. She's not much, but she'll fly." Luna touched the hull, her markings pulsing in sync with the ship's dormant systems. "She's perfect," she said, and Marcus felt a surge of pride. They boarded quickly, Marcus taking the pilot's seat while Luna settled into navigation. Her fingers danced across the controls with practiced ease, bringing systems online. The ship hummed to life just as alarms began blaring throughout the station. "Hold on," Marcus warned. He bypassed the normal startup sequence and fired the engines. The Starkiller shot out of the hangar bay like a bullet, making both of them grab their seats. The pursuing ships were waiting, 3 sleek predators against their patched-together escape vessel. Luna's hands flew over the controls, interfacing with the ship's systems in ways Marcus had never seen before. Her markings blazed as she worked. "The nebula," she said, pointing to a massive cloud of cosmic gas ahead. "We can lose them in there." Marcus nodded, pushing the engines harder. The Starkiller wasn't pretty, but she was fast. They'd reached the nebula's edge just as the first energy bolts from their pursuers streaked past the viewport. The cosmic storm swallowed them whole, beautiful and deadly. The nebula was a maze of gas clouds, radiation, and floating debris. Navigation sensors were almost useless here. But Marcus hadn't spent years as a station mechanic without learning a few tricks. He killed the main power, letting the ship drift on momentum alone. Luna caught on immediately, using her markings to dampen their energy signature. They floated silently as their pursuers searched blindly in the chaos. "That was some fancy flying," Luna said softly after the danger had passed. Her violet eyes studied Marcus with new appreciation. "Where did you learn to pilot like that?" "Same place I learned to fix ships," he replied, running system checks. "Life on the frontier teaches you to be ready for anything." He paused, glancing at her. "Though I admit, running from revolutionaries with an alien princess wasn't on my list of expected scenarios." Luna's laugh was like music, and helping the human mechanic escape pursuit wasn't part of my royal education. Her expression grew serious. "But I'm glad it's you, Marcus. There's something about you, something different." Before Marcus could respond, the ship's sensors pinged. Something massive was moving through the nebula. Luna's markings flared in recognition. "An Alderus Royal cruiser," she breathed. "They must have been tracking the revolutionaries." Her hands hesitated over the communications array. "If I signal them, they'll rescue us. Take me home." Marcus felt his heart sink, but he nodded. "That's good, right? You'll be safe." Luna didn't respond immediately. Her markings swirled with conflicting patterns, matching the tumult in her eyes. Safe, yes, but trapped again in a gilded cage. No more fixing engines. No more bad station jokes. She looked at Marcus. No more moments of just being myself. The cruiser drew closer, its massive form barely visible through the nebula's gases. They had to decide quickly. "What do you want to do?" Marcus asked simply. Not what a princess should do, or what was expected of her, but what she wanted. Luna's markings pulsed once, bright and clear. She made a decision that would change not just their lives, but the fate of an empire. "Plot a course," she said firmly. "We're not done running yet." The Starkiller drifted silently through the dark space between trading outposts. 2 weeks had passed since their escape from the nebula, and Luna sat cross-legged on the engine room floor, surrounded by holographic data streams flowing from her glowing markings. "This makes no sense," she muttered, her fingers tracing patterns in the air. "The attack patterns, the timing, the resources they're using." Her violet eyes narrowed in concentration. Marcus looked up from the engine he was tuning. "Found something. Maybe." Luna waved her hand, and the data streams shifted to show ship movements and communication patterns. The Starbreakers are too well equipped. Their ships, their weapons, they're far beyond what a rebel group should have. Marcus wiped his hands and moved closer, studying the flowing data. After weeks together in close quarters, he'd learned to read some of the basic patterns in Luna's markings. These showed worry, and something else, growing anger. "You think someone's helping them?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Not just helping." Luna's markings pulsed with sudden realization. "Look at this encryption pattern. It's Vermilion Empire code." Her hands trembled slightly. "Our oldest rivals. They're not just supporting the rebels. They're controlling them." The pieces clicked together in Marcus's mind. Your kidnapping wasn't about revolution at all. It was about starting a war. Luna nodded grimly. "With me gone, my father would be desperate. The Starbreakers would make increasingly extreme demands. He would refuse. They would threaten my life, and in the chaos," she gestured at the data streams, "the Vermilion Empire would step in, claiming to restore order, and take control of your empire in the process." Marcus finished. His hand found hers, and her markings swirled with warm colors at the contact. A sudden alarm broke their moment. The ship's sensors had detected an incoming transmission on a royal emergency frequency. Luna's markings flashed in surprise as she opened the channel. A familiar face appeared on the screen. An older woman with the same blue skin and silver hair as Luna, but with red markings instead of blue. "Aunt Maya." Luna gasped. "Little star." The woman's voice was urgent. "Thank the ancestors I found you first. The palace. It's happening faster than we feared. Your father is being pressured to launch a full attack on suspected rebel worlds." Luna's grip on Marcus's hand tightened. "But that's exactly what the Vermilion Empire wants. Those worlds are under their protection. It would trigger open war." "Yes," Maya agreed. "And some of our own admirals are pushing for it. I suspect they're already compromised." Her image flickered. "Luna, we need you. Not just as a princess, but as someone who has seen both sides now. Someone who understands there's more to strength than force." Marcus watched Luna's face as she processed her aunt's words. He could see the conflict in her eyes, in the way her markings shifted between duty and desire. "I can't go back to being just a princess," Luna said finally. "These past weeks, living without walls of ceremony, working with my hands, making my own choices." She looked at Marcus. "I've learned there are better ways to lead." Maya smiled knowingly. "Then don't go back. Go forward. And bring your human friend. We could use someone who sees things differently." Her expression grew serious. "But hurry. We have 3 days at most before the attack orders are given." After the transmission ended, silence filled the engine room. Marcus waited, letting Luna think. Finally, she turned to him, her markings glowing with determination. "I have to go back," she said, "not to be the princess they expect, but to stop this war and change things. It will be dangerous. The Vermilion Empire, the corrupted admirals, maybe even some of my own family will try to stop us." "Us?" Marcus asked, though he already knew his answer. Luna's markings rippled with affection and hope. "I'm done letting others choose my path. I choose you, Marcus, as my partner, my advisor." She paused, her markings blushing slightly pink. "And maybe something more, but only if you choose this too." Marcus looked at this incredible woman who had crashed into his life and turned it upside down. A princess who preferred engine grease to royal perfumes, who fought for what was right instead of what was expected. "Well," he said with a smile, "I always wanted to help change the galaxy." The crystal throne room of the Alderus Empire gleamed with ancient power, its walls pulsing with the same living light that flowed through Luna's markings. But today, those pristine halls echoed with angry voices and accusations. Luna stood before the assembled court, her head held high. Marcus stood beside her, ignoring the disapproving whispers his human presence caused. On the throne sat Luna's father, the Emperor, his own markings blazing with barely contained emotion. You dare accuse our oldest allies of treason." Admiral Thex's voice boomed through the chamber. His red uniform was decorated with war medals, and his markings glowed with aggressive patterns. "I dare speak the truth," Luna replied, her voice carrying the authority she had always possessed, but now wielded with purpose. She gestured, and her markings projected the evidence they had gathered: ship movements, encrypted communications, money trails. "The Vermilion Empire isn't helping us fight rebels. They created the rebels to destroy us from within." The court erupted in chaos. Marcus watched as Luna's Aunt Maya moved quietly among the nobles, whispering to those she trusted, while Luna continued her presentation. But the most damning evidence, Luna's voice cut through the noise, came from an unexpected source. She turned to Marcus, nodding. Marcus stepped forward, holding up a simple data chip. "I'm just a mechanic," he said, his plain words strange in this ornate hall. "But I know engines. The ships that attacked us, that hunted the princess, they were running on Vermilion power cores. I can prove it." The Emperor leaned forward, his ancient markings swirling with interest. "You trust this human's word, daughter." "I trust him with my life," Luna said firmly. "And more importantly, I trust his heart. He showed me that true strength isn't about power or control. It's about understanding, adaptation, and working together." Suddenly, Admiral Thex moved. His markings flared with deadly intent as he drew a hidden weapon. "The dynasty is weak," he snarled. "We need the Vermilion Empire's strength." But Marcus was already moving. Years of dodging malfunctioning engines had made him quick. He tackled the Admiral as Luna's markings flashed in warning. Royal guards swarmed forward, but the damage was done. In the Admiral's pocket, they found direct communication links to the Vermilion Empire. The Emperor rose, his markings now blazing like a sun. "We have been blind," he declared, "believing that tradition alone made us strong. But my daughter," he looked at Luna with new understanding, "she has shown us another way." In the days that followed, everything changed. Luna revealed her plan: a new form of government that combined the wisdom of tradition with the strength of innovation. The common people would have a voice. Other species, including humans, would be welcomed as equals. The old empire was like a single star, Luna explained to the court. "Beautiful, but isolated. We must become a constellation, many lights working together." To everyone's surprise, Marcus proved invaluable in implementing these changes. His practical experience helped bridge the gap between royal decree and real-world application. Where nobles saw impossibilities, he saw solutions. Where tradition created barriers, he found workarounds. 1 month after the confrontation, Luna stood on a balcony overlooking the capital city. Her markings glowed softly in the twilight as Marcus joined her. "Having second thoughts about changing 1,000 years of tradition?" he asked, standing close enough that their shoulders touched. Luna smiled, her markings swirling with contentment. "Actually, I was thinking about a broken-down ship and a stubborn mechanic who taught me more about leadership than all my royal tutors combined." "Funny," Marcus said, taking her hand. "I was thinking about a mysterious blue-skinned woman who turned my simple life into an adventure." Their fingers intertwined, and Luna's markings danced with joy. Above them, the stars shone down on an empire transforming, not through war or revolution, but through understanding and love. "You know," Luna said softly, "in the old traditions, only those with royal markings could rule." She turned to face Marcus, her violet eyes shining. "But I think it's time for new traditions." Marcus pulled her close, and as they kissed, their silhouettes were framed against the starlit sky. A human mechanic and an alien princess who had found something more valuable than empire. They had found each other, and in doing so, had changed the galaxy itself.